MPO and RPC webinar on alternative fuels and clean cities. My name is Alexis Shayowitz. I represent ICF International. We are a contractor that was hired by the New England Clean Cities Coalition to do some outreach to the local metropolitan planning organizations and regional planning councils about alternative fuels, advanced vehicles, and clean cities. We'll talk a little bit more about the overarching project that this work is being conducted under later. Also on the phone we have Steve Linnell of Maine Clean Communities, Steve Russell of Massachusetts Clean Cities, and Michelle McCutcheon-Shore of Vermont Clean Cities. They'll all have an opportunity later to give a little overview of their Clean Cities coalitions. I also wanted to let you know that we will be responding to questions at the end of the webinar. If you do have a question, please feel free to type it into the question box on your webinar screen. We're also recording this webinar, and it'll be posted on the Three Clean Cities Coalition website. At the end of the presentation, we will give contact information for all of the Clean Cities coordinators as well as myself. And we will also be sending these slides out. There are the links in the slides and that sort of thing, so we will be sending them out at the end of the webinar, so you'll have access to those links. So if you're not familiar with Clean Cities, it is a national program supported by the U.S. Department of Energy. The goal of the program is to reduce petroleum consumption in the transportation sector, and it's implemented by a national network of about 100 Clean Cities coalitions. These coalitions bring together stakeholders from the public and private sectors to deploy alternative fuels, advanced vehicles, idle reduction technologies, fuel economy improvements, and other technologies. New England is home to several Clean Cities coalitions, including those on the phone today. As I mentioned, this webinar is part of a U.S. Department of Energy grant that we will talk about later, and it was designed specifically to educate, or this part of the grant was designed specifically to educate MPOs and RPCs in the region about alternative fuels and clean cities. So that's what we are here doing today. So this is just an agenda of what we'll go over today. The first thing is an overview of alternative fuels. I'll then turn it over to the Clean Cities coordinators on the phone to discuss their individual coalitions. I know that there are some other New England stakeholders on the line today, but we will focus on Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont. We'll also talk about the Clean Cities tools available to you, and then go into a literature review that was conducted under this project of local MPO and RPC planning documents. Lastly, we'll talk about a guide that was developed specifically for this audience on alternative fuels, advanced vehicles, and clean cities, as well as situations where we hope in the future that you all think of clean cities and come to us for, or come to your coordinator specifically for information about alternative fuels. So today we'll talk about the fuels that are depicted here on this slide, specifically biodiesel, electricity, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas, and propane. We'll also touch on the different petroleum reduction strategies that are listed underneath. In general, alternative fuels have a variety of benefits. They're renewable, domestically produced, environmentally friendly, economically sound, and they have performance improvement benefits. Not all of these benefits apply to all of the fuels and all applications, and there certainly are challenges associated with using the fuels in certain applications, which is why we often say there's no silver bullet to reducing petroleum consumption. I'll describe the fuels and leave it up to the coordinators to talk a little bit about the fleets in New England that are actually using these fuels and technologies. So the first group of fuels is the biofuels. The main benefit of biofuels is that they, in certain blend levels, can be used in conventional diesel and gasoline engines without significant modifications to the vehicles. Biodiesel is the first one. This is a heavy-duty fuel typically. Biodiesel is manufactured from vegetable oils, animal fats, and recycled restaurant grease. Its primary use, like I said, is in heavy-duty engines. It can be blended in a variety of concentrations. Biodiesel is noted, you'll see it as B and then a number. where the number is the percentage of biodiesel that's been mixed with diesel. Almost all diesel engines can actually use B5, so 5% biodiesel without modification. And many OEMs have actually approved and encouraged higher level blends, for instance, B20 in their vehicles. The National Biodiesel Board actually has a full listing of which manufacturers and vehicles have approved higher blends. While fuel quality was an issue at one point with biodiesel, it has significantly improved over the last several years due to fuel quality standards out of ASTM, as well as a voluntary program called BQ 9000. Ethanol is, like I said, a light-duty vehicle fuel. It's mixed with gasoline to be used in light-duty vehicles. It's made from starchy or cellulosic feedstocks. In the United States, most ethanol is made from corn. It can be used in a variety of concentrations like biodiesel, where E and then a number tells you what level of ethanol is being used. E10 is considered substantially similar to gasoline and can be used in all vehicles. It's the most common blend and is available. About 95% of the gasoline sold in the United States is actually E10. E15 has been approved for use by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in model year 2001 and newer vehicles. There are mid-level blends available through blender pumps. These may be E20 or E30. And then E85 is available for use in flexible fuel vehicles. The content actually of ethanol in E85 depends on the geography and the season and the state. And it varies, the amount of ethanol varies by the time of year, so that there's actually lower levels of ethanol when there are colder temperatures. One thing to keep in mind with ethanol is that the energy content is less than gasoline. So there's about 25% less energy per gallon of ethanol or E85 than gasoline. That said, the power and acceleration and other performance measurements are the same on a vehicle using ethanol versus gasoline. So the next fuel that we'll talk about, or the next group of vehicles specifically that we'll talk about, are electric vehicles. Hybrid electric vehicles don't require charging, but they do have a battery that stores electricity through regenerative braking and other technologies and captures that energy to fuel the vehicle. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are like hybrid electric vehicles, except they're plugged in to charge the battery. They do still have an internal combustion engine and do still run on that internal combustion engine like a hybrid electric vehicle in the case where the battery is depleted. And then all electric vehicles do not have an internal combustion engine, and they just use a battery that's plugged in. The graph here shows the life cycle emissions of an electric vehicle or a hybrid electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. This, like I said, is the life cycle emissions. An electric vehicle has no tailpipe emissions, but this takes into account the actual electricity used to charge the vehicle. And this chart was generated based on Montpelier, Vermont, but there's tools available through the Alternative Fuels Data Center where you can actually go in and look at the life cycle emissions of these vehicles for your specific area. There's a variety of charging options for PHEVs and EVs. They're dependent on, or they dictate how fast you can actually charge the vehicle. A level 1 charger is 120 volts and charges a vehicle in about 6 to 20 hours. A level 2 charger is about 240 volts and will charge a vehicle in 3 to 8 hours. And a DC fast charge is 208 to 600 volts and will charge a vehicle in 30 minutes. Electric vehicles also open the door to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which are potentially 2 to 3 times more efficient than conventional vehicles. They only produce water as tailpipe emissions and are currently entering the market in certain areas this year and next. Natural gas is another fuel available. It's predominantly methane. For the most part, it's extracted from oil and gas wells, though renewable natural gas is also produced from decaying organic materials such as waste from plants, landfills, wastewater plants, and livestock. The significant benefit of natural gas is the economics, which we'll look at a little bit more later. It's significantly less expensive than diesel and gasoline on an energy content basis. It's available as compressed natural gas, or CNG, or liquefied natural gas, or LNG. CNG is used in light and heavy-duty applications and is measured in cubic feet or pounds. It can be distributed through the existing pipeline system and into the vehicle. Liquefied natural gas is distributed similarly to gasoline. It's stored at negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit in double wall vacuum sealed pressure vessels due to the high pressure and the low temperature. It's primarily used in heavy-duty vehicles where a longer range is necessary. The reason for that is that compressed natural gas vehicles tend to have a shorter range than a conventional vehicle, but when the fuel is liquefied, you have a higher energy content by volume. NGVs are available as original equipment manufacturer models or conversions and can be dedicated, bi-fuel, or dual fuel. Bi-fuel means that the vehicle actually has two different tanks and can run on either fuel. Dual fuel means that it uses diesel for the initial ignition of the engine, but then switches over to natural gas almost exclusively. The last fuel that we'll talk about is propane. Propane is also called liquefied petroleum gas, or auto gas. It is produced as a byproduct of natural gas processing and crude oil refining. It can be used in light, medium, and heavy-duty applications. And there are a variety of original equipment manufacturer models and conversions available. The major benefit, again, of propane is that it can be significantly less expensive than other fuels, and the infrastructure isn't as expensive as natural gas, for example. The disadvantage can be the fluctuation in fuel price. However, fleets that work with their petroleum marketer to lock in their fuel price actually don't necessarily have this issue. So as I mentioned, there's other petroleum reduction strategies that Clean Cities focuses on. It's not just converting vehicles to fuels, different fuels. We also have idle reduction, and that may include onboard equipment such as APUs, or auxiliary power units, truck stop electrification, equipment that you can install on the vehicle like low rolling resistance tires, aerodynamic equipment, fuel tracking devices and telematics, and speed control modules. And then there are a variety of driver behavior changes that can be made, and those include implementing policies for instance, idle reduction, optimizing routes, using fleet cards, maintaining the vehicle, and reducing the vehicle load. So next, I will turn it over to the specific Clean Cities Coalition to talk a little bit, again, about their specific coalition. First up is Steve Linnell from Maine.
Thanks, Alexis. Maine Clean Communities has been around since 1997. We were designated by the U.S. Department of Energy back then, and we just were redesignated this past April for another 3 years or more. We're housed at the Greater Portland Council of Government, and we have a pretty large stakeholder base, and it continues to grow. I've been the coordinator here since we started, and COG also works on a number of other related types of projects, much of it in the transit, but other transportation as well as other energy projects as well. So I think one of the coolest things that we're doing right now is we have a electric vehicle, Nissan Leaf, that we're leasing for 2 years. We're just about closing in on the first year, and we've been getting it out to all of our member municipalities, and we will be getting it out to some of our stakeholders as well. And it's been very successful. Many of our municipalities are purchasing electric vehicles for their municipal fleet. They're putting in infrastructure for charging for their own uses, but also for the public. So that's been a great project, and we'd love to do more of that with all the fuels, frankly. To date, our biggest project is still the CNG project with Greater Portland Metro, and they continue to replace their fleet with compressed natural gas transit buses, and the Portland School Department is growing their fleet of school buses that also fuel at the same site. And Metro actually does some of their maintenance as well for the school buses. We've put a lot of energy and effort into getting that first public CNG station, because the one at Metro really is not a public station. It's nothing happening at the moment, but I'm confident that in the next year or two we'll finally see some public stations. And when I say public, I mean this should be noted that most of what Clean Cities does is with fleets, and it's not really our intent to promote alternative fuel vehicles to the general public for the most part, although the electric vehicles certainly fall in the consumer market just as much as in the fleet market. But building these CNG stations or propane stations or even biodiesel depots, it's really for the fleets, but it grows the infrastructure so that eventually it might be possible for the consumer market to fuel at some of these places and think about alternative fuel vehicles as well. Next slide. We do produce biodiesel here in Maine, and we have biodiesel being produced in many of the other states in New England. And just as an aside, we have another, as part of this grant that we're doing, we've convened the biodiesel producers, formed a working group with them, and have had and are promoting the use of it, as well as helping them to work through some of the issues that they have with production and maintaining the use of it so that they can, gauge their supply to the demand that's out there. Our biggest user for biodiesel is certainly Oakhurst Dairy, and they've basically, well, I wouldn't say ignored, but they've proven that a lot of the limitations that are imposed by the manufacturers on biodiesel to keep it at 5% or 20% biodiesel are really not necessary. Their fleet running just fine, and they're running up to 70% or even more biodiesel. We're also promoting propane in a state like Maine where there isn't a lot of natural gas. That's the other gaseous fuel that really extends throughout the state. And there's a little bit more going on in the north, up around Bangor. R.H. Foster has put in some dispensers that are open for other fleets to use. But there are several school bus fleets around the state that are using propane. And the Island Explorer has been using propane for close to 20 years. And I'll mention that again in another minute. We have a lot of outreach that we do, and we just finished up with a intern who got us into social media. So we're now on Facebook and Twitter. And we've actually hired her, and so we'll be able to keep that going because I'm not sure I would have been able to do that. Next slide, please. So finally, for me, the Acadia, there's a program through Clean Cities for national parks, and we were able to get some money for them to replace some vehicles and actually reduce the number of vehicles. So it's a combination of some low-speed electric vehicles, some on-road EVs, and some charging equipment, as well as a couple of propane vehicles. They're in the process of ordering those, and probably sometime in the next year they'll be deployed. But we're also working with them on the Green Fleet or Green Your Fleet program, which is an outreach and education program to for both the park employees and the visiting public. And as I mentioned, the propane buses in Acadia, one of the things that Clean Cities does is, well, first of all, we never let go of a project because there's always some new thing to solve. And in their case, the propane engines that they've been using are no longer being produced, and we're helping them look at options so that they can continue with alternative fuels. And I guess that's all I'll say about that for now, but we're confident that we can keep them using alternative fuels. And I think that was it for me.
Steve Russell, hand it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Alexis?
Yes, I can.
Great. Well, Massachusetts Clean Cities has been around since 1977, and we cover the whole state. And unlike Maine, we're housed in the Department of Energy Resources Department. We're a state agency. We're part of a state agency here in Massachusetts. We find that that's been very effective in the work we've been doing here. We have, you can see, we've been doing, and we were just redesignated a year ago, so we're excited about that. And we have 300 plus stakeholders. Those are people both from the private and public sector who are interested in alternative fuels in some way, shape, or form. And often when they attend meetings, and they know where to find information on the Massachusetts Clean Cities. Next slide. We have meetings every 2 months, and we feature different fuels at those meetings. So different people attend different meetings. We found it very effective. We've had meetings on hydrogen fuel cells. We've had meetings on gaseous fuels, right down to biofuels. So we're pretty excited about those meetings, and we move those meetings around the state. So if you don't like coming into Boston, you're certainly welcome to attend meetings either on the Cape or out in Western Mass. We have been providing grant funding. Recently, we've received some CNAC funds, and we're in the process, and I believe that all but one program opportunity notice is out on the street. And if you go to the Massachusetts Clean Cities website, you can see all you can find a location to see all those grant availability. The other thing is we've done here in Massachusetts, we've found some funds, and we are actually having an electric vehicle consumer rebate. So if you're interested in purchasing a battery electric or a plug-in electric vehicle, you can be eligible for funding as a consumer. This is a little different. This is not a fleet program. This is actually a consumer rebate program, because we signed on with 7 other states to endorse the 8-state MOU, which is encouraged. We want 3 million electric vehicles in these 8 states by 2025. So we're trying to push those electric vehicles, which is wonderful for fuel reduction as well as environmental impact. We also, to give you an idea of some of the fleets that are doing things here in Massachusetts. Frito-Lay has 6 all-electric delivery vehicles. Lucky for them, their load is light, and the distance they travel is appropriate for electric vehicles, so it's pretty exciting. We have a shuttle service here in Boston that shuttles around the airport, which is exclusively E85, the Green Passage bus system. They're pretty excited about what they're doing. Luckily for us, there's an E85 station very close to the airport, so it's very appropriate for them to be using a flex fuel vehicle. Also, Boston City Fleet is a big user of biodiesel, as well as they've received several grants to purchase electric vehicles and now have several battery electric vehicles in their fleet. They've taken advantage of the Mass Department of Environmental Protection Mass EVIP program, which is a program which is currently in its 3rd phase. If you're a city or town in Massachusetts, you're eligible to receive up to $7,500 towards a battery electric vehicle, as well as $15,000 towards charging stations. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Along with the Boston City Fleet using biodiesel, the Harvard University is a big user of biodiesel. In addition, in the propane arena, Knights Limousine, which is, they're housed out in Shrewsbury, Mass, just outside of Worcester, but they do a lot of transportation. They're the big transporter of individuals who need to go to Logan Airport. So about a year ago, we were able to get propane passed to be eligible to go pass through the tunnel, which was a big stumbling block for them. Once they've done that, they've now converted half their fleet to propane, which is pretty exciting. And the MBTA is one of the largest users of natural gas here in the state, as well as the Steamship Authority is using natural gas. So those are some of the things. We have in our recent newsletter that we just produced, we announced several things. We're having ethanol first responder training this week out in Westfield, Mass. We announced the National Drive Electric Week, which is coming up September 15th to 21st. We also announced Alt Wheels, which is coming up October 20th. And if you've got a fleet, you want to learn about the latest alternative fuels, we have a day-long workshop out in Norwood, which enables folks to not only learn about the alternative fuels, but kick the tires and see the actual hardware, which is pretty exciting. So we have quite a bit of things going on here in Massachusetts, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that when I started here 5 years ago, there were 7 electric vehicle charging stations, and now there are over 400 electric vehicle charging stations across the state, level 2s. And we're now focusing on DC fast charging, so stay tuned. When you get that battery electric car and you come down from Maine with that Leaf, you'll be able to do a fast charge and keep on going to Connecticut. So we're excited about that, so stay tuned. So that's Massachusetts.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Great, thanks. So this is Michelle McCutcheon-Shore from Vermont Clean Cities. Let me go to the next slide. So we've been around since 2001. We serve the entire state of Vermont, and we're kind of unique in the way that we are housed at a university and a transportation research center. We're actually one of 3 coalitions in the nation to be at universities, and we're the only one at a transportation research center. We have a 5-member advisory board that helps provide insight and support to the coalition and helps us write our annual operating plan. Those members are members from private and public fleets as well as fuel providers. So we have quite amount of activity going on in Vermont, spanning across the fuels, particularly in EVs and ESEs. We have been installing charging stations all over the state. We now have, I think, 39 at last count. We should have 43. Of that 39, we actually have 5 DC fast chargers in the state, which is fantastic. We just released a video about the city of Winooski and their use of electric vehicles. In terms of CNG infrastructure and fleets, we only have 1 public fueling station in the state, which we are really trying to change because we have so many fleets coming through the state that use that fueling station to fuel. It's basically at capacity, so we're really trying to work with different stakeholders, particularly Vermont Gas, to try to figure out if there's another place in the state we can have a fueling station. RNG has kind of been coming up in the news. We had a renewable natural gas conference here at the university in the fall, which was very successful, and we brought together the Department of Ag, VTrans, and various stakeholders to try to look at how we can mix renewable natural gas into our natural gas mix that comes through the state, particularly in fueling vehicles. Waste haulers have had a great success with the state with using natural gas. Casella uses it, and Myers is currently looking at trying to convert some of their fleet to natural gas. And hopefully with the increased access to fueling stations, we're able to do that. Biodiesel had great success in the state in the 90s, and then it kind of fizzled out due to various quality issues, but it has come back full swing. Born Energy now provides biodiesel as one of the fuels that they provide to fleets, which is fantastic, and they do have a public fueling station. Black Bear Biodiesel is the first biodiesel producer to open up in the state, and they just opened up about 3 weeks ago down in Plainfield. Propane is another fuel that was very popular there for a while and then kind of fizzled out, but now it's becoming more popular down in the southern state of Vermont. We had an entire fleet of state police vehicles convert to propane, which was fantastic, and now we have a lot of school buses that are interested in as well. Every month we release a newsletter. This has all the list of current events and news that are happening around the state. We also listed at the bottom of our newsletter various current grant opportunities. If any of these grant opportunities look interesting to you and you have more questions, feel free to contact me. We try to support all of our stakeholders in finding grant opportunities to expand their use of alternative fuels. We hold educational workshops, and I, like all the rest of the Clean Cities Coalition coordinators, go around and meet with various fleet managers one-on-one to try to really look at how they might be able to better utilize alternative fuels in their fleet. We also, my office, the Transportation Research Center, particularly focuses on disaster preparedness, and we are starting to look at various alternative fuels and how they can be better used by not only first responders, but also by the state in responding to disasters. So this page is just an overview of the different stakeholders across all three coalitions. I'm certainly not going to go through all of them, but what's important here to know is how all the stakeholders vary in shapes and sizes and what type of businesses, public, private. We have OPS Dairy on here, as Steve mentioned earlier. We have some of the bigger fleets such as Staples, National Grid, and then we have small towns and cities, and just anyone who's interested in utilizing alternative fuels to reduce their petroleum consumption can be a stakeholder with us, and we just really want to drive that point home.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Steve and Steve as well. Next, we'll go into how can you sort of assess whether your or the organizations that you're speaking with in a day-to-day basis, whether alternative fuels are right for them. There's a variety of tools available for the national level Clean Cities initiative. There are also numerous tools available from specific coalitions and tools that they can point you to in their state that may not be specific to Clean Cities, but specific to your area. So I really do, in addition to the tools I'm going to talk about, suggest that you go to their websites and check those out. So the Alternative Fuels Data Center is just a great place, a starting point for a lot of these tools. I encourage you to bookmark this page. It's where you can find links to pretty much all the tools that I'm going to talk about today. So do go there and hit up their tools page, because that's where all of these tools can be found. The first one is an alternative fueling station locator. This locator tracks all the alternative fueling stations in the country. That includes electric vehicle charging stations, biodiesel, E85, hydrogen, so on and so forth, all the fuels we've talked about today. And it includes both public and private stations as well as planned stations, so you can see where a station might be popping up in the near future in your area. There are more search options available beyond just the initial address search. So you can search by access, so public or private, owner type, and payment type. And the tool is constantly being updated. In fact, there's new search options that are going to be available within the next few months. So check back often. You can use a plan a route function as well as a data download that will allow you to download all the stations in your search or all the stations in your state and have all the information in an Excel spreadsheet. The vehicle cost calculator, also available through the AFDC, is a cost of ownership calculator. Primarily, it also shows emissions, greenhouse gas emissions over the life cycle of the fuel for most of the vehicle models available today. It's mostly a light-duty vehicle tool. All of the vehicle makes and models that are available on the market today are sort of built into the tool. You can also customize the search using a customized vehicle. So if you did want to type it in a heavy-duty vehicle and you had the fuel economy and you had the information, then you could use this tool to get the basic outputs, which are, like I said, cost of ownership graphs and information about emissions. AFDC also has light and heavy-duty vehicle searches. So there are two different tools that allow you to search for vehicles. This can be really helpful, specifically when talking to fleets on the heavy-duty side. Is there a specific fuel type that they're interested in? Is there an application? So a transit bus fleet would search by that application. If there's a specific manufacturer that they like to work with, you can search by manufacturer. That might be the case specifically for light-duty vehicles. The case study search, I think that a lot of both, all kinds of organizations find this helpful just when talking to fleets about the different case studies that are out there. People want to know that other fleets have done this and that they've had success. So that's the point of the case studies search. You can find both video and written case studies on the search, and it's also searchable by fuel and technology and application. So one of the things that comes up quite a bit in New England is whether these fuels can be used in cold weather and mountainous areas. I mean, that would be particularly the case in Vermont and New Hampshire, but other parts of the different states as well. So this is just some outputs from the case studies database about fleets in those types of areas that are using these fuels. So I encourage you to go and check out these different links. These fleets are having success, particularly with cold weather operation. You see there's lots of biodiesel here. There's lots of electric vehicles and propane, and well, all across the board, all the fuels are represented here. So the A-Fleet tool, I think it's the acronym for the Alternative Fuel Life Cycle Environmental and Economic Transportation Tool developed by the Argonne National Laboratory. This tool is a spreadsheet-based tool which allows fleets and others to calculate payback for these vehicles across your fleet. And so it does economics, but it also has environmental benefits. You can compare vehicle acquisition costs, and the output, like I said, includes payback period, annual operating costs, annual emissions, and total cost of ownership. So this is just one example of an A-Fleet output. Like I said, it's a spreadsheet tool, and then you get a variety of graphs and other information. But this is comparing 3 diesel buses to 3 CNG transit buses, and what you see as far as the inputs go, and you can definitely switch these around. So if you actually find that the incremental cost of a vehicle in your area is more or less than this, then certainly that can be changed in the tool. But in this case, it was $60,000. The fuel cost difference, and this is based on New England prices for compressed natural gas and diesel, was $1.53 per diesel gallon equivalent, and the input that we used here is 35,000 miles a year. The results are 6.2-year payback on the vehicle. As you can see, over time that payback does become greater. That's because the vehicle cost, or sorry, the real benefit is the cost of the fuel and the reduced cost of the fuel. What you're finding is that the annual operating savings is about $10,000, and the annual greenhouse gas on the life cycle basis is about 10 short tons emissions saved. The next tool is the laws and incentives database available through the AFDC. This is another searchable tool where you can search for laws in your jurisdiction, so your state, at the federal level, or even in other states if you're curious to see what other people are doing. There's also local examples available, so if you're interested in local incentives and laws related to alternative fuels, you can find some examples all the way at the bottom here on this screenshot. So just some examples of things that come out of the laws and incentives database. The first would be federal incentives. We have descriptions of the qualified plug-in electric drive motor vehicle tax credit, as well as the various hydrogen infrastructure tax credits that actually expire this year. I encourage you to go check those out. From an MPO perspective, I know that DOT funding is sort of typically at the top of the list. This here, I just pointed out that there are a number of MAP 21 provisions that specifically mention electric and natural gas fueling stations as eligible investments under these different programs. The sections listed here are not sections as you typically see them. They're actually sections of MAP 21, the bill. But there are, like I said, a variety of different programs that through DOT that actually are specifically directed by MAP 21 that state that electric and natural gas fueling stations are eligible. Another thing we hear a lot about when talking to the MPOs and DOTs is about CMAQ funding. I know that a lot of areas in New England are in attainment, so the funding isn't that significant, but I did want to let you know that there are examples of CMAQ funds being used for alternative fuels across the country. There are diesel emission reduction grant programs in Ohio, the New York voucher incentive program for electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles, and then the Massachusetts Clean Vehicle Project that Steve already spoke about today. That's funded by CMAQ as well. All of these links, like I said, this presentation will be distributed, and I encourage you to check out these links, see what other people are doing as far as their CMAQ funds. The other thing I did want to mention is that some of the case studies that are in the case study database talk about CMAQ funds being used for alternative fuels. So again, you can go in and look to see what different states are doing. These are just examples of the descriptions that are in the database of Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont laws and incentives. I'm not going to go into any great detail about any of these, but suffice to say that there are a number of descriptions in there of the different legislation that has passed in the 3 states to both regulate and encourage alternative fuels. So the next thing that we'll talk about is under this grant, which I'll go into more detail about, the literature review that we conducted of the different planning documents out of the different MPOs and RPCs in the region. To give you a general overview of the grant, it's called the Removing Barriers, Implementing Policies, and Advancing Alternative Fuel Markets in New England. It involves coalitions from Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. There are a number of different activities that the various coordinators actually touched on a few of them, but one of them was to reach out to local MPOs, and we sort of expanded that to RPCs because we found a lot of overlap in the New England region. But there are a number of workshops of these different coalitions, workshops, trainings, working groups, that kind of things that are going on in the different coalitions that I encourage you to check out. So under the MPO project, I did want to point out that the MPO project was specifically for Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont. Like I said, I know we have some New Hampshire and Rhode Island folks on the phone as well. those two coalitions were involved in the larger grant and a lot of the other things that are going on under that grant. But the literature review for the MPOs was the first step for us in understanding whether planning organizations already consider alternative fuels a priority. We included all 15 MPOs in the 3 states as well as 20 additional planning organizations. And we looked at a number of different planning documents that come out of your different organizations, including those listed here. We compiled all of the plans via internet search and outreach. You may have heard from us, some of you may have heard from us looking for the most recent planning documents out of your organization. And we reviewed each one for a set of keywords related to alternative fuels and infrastructure. The keywords are listed here, topics that we've covered already in this presentation for the most part. And we picked out a few planning documents that we considered notable due to their extensive information and project plans related to alternative fuels. So just some examples. This is not inclusive. I selected one from each state just so you could see what the different organizations are doing. In Massachusetts, Northern Middlesex MPO, according to their regional transportation plan, they're focused on zero-emission vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles, and they mention a local fleet that is currently operating CNG and hybrid electric. In Maine, the Greater Portland Council of Governments and the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission sustained Southern Maine Long-Range Transportation Plan, it's a mouthful, includes several items related to alternative fuels, including supporting the Maine Clean Communities program, converting fleets to CNG, biodiesel, and propane, establishing an EVSE network, and reducing fuel consumption. A lot of overlap with what Steve talked about earlier about what he's doing in Maine due to the fact that he's actually housed in the Greater Portland Council of Governments. In Vermont, the Chittenden County MPO's ECOS plan plans for more widespread adoption of EVs and NGVs, and also includes projects to develop an EVSE network. There's a lot going on in Vermont right now on the electric vehicle front. So again, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I did want to point out that the literature review did include a review of all these state-level plans. We looked through to see what the DOTs specifically are doing, but also the energy agencies in the different states and what they've committed to do on alternative fuels. So the last thing that we'll talk about today is the guide that we've developed specifically for this audience, for the MPOs and RPCs. And this is just a screenshot of the guide, the cover of the guide, but the purpose is to provide a compendium of information, tools, and resources about alternative fuels. It provides much more information than what we've provided in the webinar, but what you'll see is there's a lot of overlap between what we've provided today in this webinar and what you can find in this compendium. You can absolutely read through the document in its entirety, but it's also designed so that you can refer back with questions when you're talking to your stakeholders, municipalities, that kind of thing, and also when you're conducting your organization planning. So the contents include an introduction, an overview of the Local Clean Cities Coalition, an overview of alternative fuel basics, the top 10 alternative fuel questions answered. So questions like, are alternative fuels vehicles and infrastructure expensive? What incentives are available? What's involved in planning alternative fuel infrastructure? What AFV models are available? All kinds of things that are covered here in the top 10 questions. And then the top 10 tools, which align very closely to the tools that I spoke about earlier, but include a number of different alternative fuel data center tools and those that have been developed by Argonne National Lab and others. And this is the link. Like I said, you'll be getting the presentation with a link that's posted here. The other thing is that most of the coalitions will be posting the MPO and RPC guide on their website, so you can absolutely go there for information. So moving forward, our main goal of the publication and this webinar is that you will keep alternative fuels and clean cities in mind. And that includes when you're developing your planning documentation, including your TIPs and your long-range transportation plans. The coalitions can be resources and may even reach out to you about including model language in your planning documents about alternative fuels. We hope you'll consider alternative fuels when you're looking at internal and external funding opportunities, particularly when you're looking at vehicle replacement projects and talking with municipalities and transit organizations. We hope that you'll think of alternative fuels in clean cities when you're talking to your stakeholders, like I said, about much like municipalities regarding their vehicle and fueling options and the associated investments. And when you're thinking about partners for your different projects, that you'll come back and talk to the Clean Cities Coalition. And another thing that we just wanted to point out is that if there are development projects going on in your area and there may be an opportunity for fueling infrastructure or vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles, certainly keep Clean Cities in mind. So this is the contact information for all of us. Really, like I said, your best resource is your local Clean Cities Coalition. So my contact information is up here, as well as the national level Clean Cities Technical Response Service. So certainly reach out to me or to us if you have questions, but your local coordinator is really your on-the-ground resource. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into the question box, and we will we'll attempt to answer them. Like I said, the slides will be available on the Clean Cities Coalition websites, and I will also send them to everybody who registered today so you have all the information that you need. So Abby, do we have any questions?
It looks like we have just one question, and it's regarding the Alternative Fuels Data Center Station Locator and whether it's available on smartphones.
Yes, and I absolutely should have mentioned that. The Station Locator is available as an app on the iPhone, and they're currently developing an Android app, which I don't want to give a timeline because it seems to get pushed back. These things are harder than they seem. But there will be an Android app available, and all of that information is available on the AFDC Station Locator website. The other thing to mention is that the Station Locator is available as a widget. So if you'd like to actually include the Station Locator on your website and allow people to search for stations directly from your website, you can actually use the Station Locator widget for that.
Great. Looks like there's also another question. Can you explain the energy content of alternative fuels and how to compare it to traditional fuels, conventional fuels?
Sure. I don't have all of the numbers right here. Like I mentioned, all the ethanol, I do know E85 is about 25% less energy content. And what that means is that for every gallon of E85, the vehicle is going to be 25% or 27% less efficient, or go 27% fewer miles on that gallon. As far as a comparison across fuels, that's all available on the AFDC Alternative Fuels Data Center Fuel Properties page, which you can pull up and see really clear comparisons between the different fuels. Some of them are less and some of them are more, so just you can go on and see that there.
And I think that's it for questions.
Okay. Do we have anything else that the coordinators on the phone want to touch on? Okay. Hearing nothing.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, looks like there's another one.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It looks like more of a comment, but regarding fuel cells and the other versions of flow batteries. Wondering if anyone has any thoughts on the potential for that.
That's not something I'm familiar with. Do any of the coordinators on the phone, are you familiar with flow batteries? Do we have the name, Abby, of the person that asked the question?
James Fisher.
Okay. James, we'll absolutely follow up with you all. We'll look into that and get back to you. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we will be in touch with the slides, and all the contact information will be listed there if you do have any additional questions down the line. Have a nice afternoon.